Welcome back, and joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Congressman Schiff, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you. I want to start off by asking you about that unsealed brief that was filed by Jack Smith. We should note that it was unsealed by the judge. In it, he reveals new details about what happened on January 6th, including, he says, that when former President Trump was told that his then Vice President Mike Pence had to be rushed out of where he was for safety and that he was in danger, Trump's response was, "So what?" What was your reaction to hearing that, Congressman?
Well, that was the most shocking part to me. It just reaffirmed, I think, what we all know about Donald Trump, and that is he cares about no one except himself. He cares about nothing, not the Constitution, not our institutions, not the Capitol, not his own colleagues, nothing but himself. And in that respect, that one exchange when the president is informed as the vice president is essentially being sequestered in a safe place because his life is at risk. People are chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." The president's reaction is, "So what?" That, to me, is so telling and so powerful.
I want to ask you about the timing of all of this, Congressman, which you know has been in focus. A former federal prosecutor referred to this brief as Jack Smith's, quote, October cheap shot. Donald Trump has accused the Justice Department of election interference, essentially by violating its longstanding practice not to take public steps in politically related cases close to an election. So I wonder if you would weigh in on this. Do you think it was appropriate for this brief to be unsealed this close to the election, Congressman?
I do think it was appropriate, and we have to look at why the delay was occasioned in the first place. And so much of the delay had to do with the defendant's stall tactics in the lower courts and the appellate courts and the Supreme Court. It had a lot to do with the Supreme Court's decision to wait until the last day of session, to wait until as close to the election as possible, because the Supreme Court now, sadly, the legacy of the Chief Justice Roberts has become yet another partisan institution, decided to issue its decision at the latest moment. And then what you see the special counsel do is what he should do, which is promptly go back to the grand jury, get a superseding indictment that meets the new limits placed on evidence and charges in a presidential prosecution, bring that indictment forward, then file a brief before the district court to continue the process. So I think the special counsel did what he should do, and I think the court was well within its discretion to make that public.
And yet, Congressman, just to remind you, this is what you said back in 2016 when then FBI Director James Comey reopened essentially the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. Take a look.
The DOJ policies against making a statement about a pending or closed case, and certainly not doing it in the days leading up to an investigation, is there for a reason.
I think this was the exercise of very poor judgment. I say that not just as a Clinton supporter, but someone who spent 6 years in the Department of Justice as an assistant U.S. attorney. You don't talk about pending cases. You certainly don't do it right around election time.
And again, that was reopened just days before the election. Why shouldn't that same standard apply now, Congressman?
Because what you had there was the director of the FBI unilaterally making a decision to talk about an open investigation. It wasn't a filing in a court. It wasn't a decision by a judge weighing the policy, weighing the evidence. This was James Comey's unilateral decision in the weeks leading up to the election. That's very different. Prosecutors, before bringing a case, and this was before any case was brought by James Comey, or prosecutors speaking to the public about evidence in the case, doing so indeed days before the election, even not knowing what that evidence was. That is a very different circumstance than a court filing made under seal as it was here.
This week, President Biden, as you know, said that he doesn't know if the election will be peaceful, though he does think it will be free and fair. Do you think this election will be peaceful and free and fair, Congressman?
I think what the president said was all too accurate, shockingly, breathtakingly, tragically accurate, and that is, yes, I think the election will be free and fair, but will it be free of violence at the end of the day? if it is close, if Donald Trump loses again, as I expect that he will contest it. He has more reason to contest it than he did before, not because of any flaw in the election, but because Donald Trump believes, and perhaps with reason, that if he doesn't succeed at the ballot box, he may be going to jail. So he's going to challenge the results. And we saw tragically what happened when he did that 4 years earlier. And what's more, we see him laying the same foundation to fraudulently challenge the results once again, putting out the same big lies that he put out 4 years earlier. So sadly, to hear an American president say that he cannot fully expect that this may be a peaceful transition of power, it breaks your heart, because this is the legacy of Donald Trump, which is we now cannot go into an election with full confidence that the results will be peaceful.
Let me shift now to the ongoing developments and escalations in the Middle East. I want to ask you to respond broadly to what you just heard from Senator Tom Cotton, who makes the case that we, quite frankly, hear from former President Trump, which is that part of why you have this unrest, this escalation in the Middle East, is because, as Cotton just said, he argues the Biden administration has been weak in its foreign policy and its policies toward the Middle East. What say you? How do you respond to that allegation that we have heard, quite frankly, not just from Cotton, but from a number of Republicans on the campaign trail?
I think it's the kind of nonsense you hear on the campaign trail. Look, we are where we are, tragically, 1 year after October 7th, because Hamas massacred, raped, tortured 1,200 people a year ago, and they still retain dozens and dozens of hostages, including Americans. Hezbollah, the day after Hamas began that war, expressed its solidarity with Hamas by also lobbing projectiles into Israel. That's why we are where we are. And, you know, my heart breaks for the families of those hostages that have gone through a year of hell. Yeah. But I think that we ought to, you know, try to put ourselves in the position of a state attacked the way Israel was. We would never accept the continued governance of a terrorist entity like Hamas. We would never accept a situation where our people are held hostage, as indeed they are today. We would never accept a situation where tens of thousands of our citizens couldn't return to their homes because a different terrorist group, Hezbollah, was continuing to attack them. That's why we are where we are. And Israel will retaliate. If I were advising the Prime Minister of Israel, I would say go after those ballistic missile factories, storage areas. That would be proportionate in my view, but it would also help degrade Iran's capacity.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question, which you just answered, so I appreciate it. Let me turn now to the state of the race. Obviously incredibly close nationally and in key battleground states. You told me the last time we were together on this program in July that Vice President Harris, who wasn't, of course, at the top of the ticket at the time, that you believed she could win the election overwhelmingly. Given how close this race is, Congressman, do you still believe, realistically, that Kamala Harris can win this race overwhelmingly?
I do. You know, by the standards of today, I think she can win overwhelmingly. You know, given how divided the country is, overwhelming may be winning by 100,000 votes or 80,000 votes in these key battleground states. I think that's within her capacity to do. And I made that point because I was at the time urging that the torch be passed to her, and it was, and I think the effect has been dramatic. Young people who were disengaged are now engaged, interested, active, volunteering. So I think we are well poised to win this thing. But it is still scary close, and I can't remember a time in history when we had such a clear, a dramatic choice about the direction the country would take. Whether we move forward to an economy that works for everyone, with a democracy that is healthy and intact, or whether we move back to this terrible, you know, Trump American carnage. And I think faced with that prospect and that choice, Kamala Harris will win this race, and I'm very optimistic about the outcome.
All right, scary close, a little different than overwhelmingly, but we heard you make your case. Congressman, thank you very much. Adam
well,
Schiff,
if I could just say, the reason why the margin is so important is because they will challenge the results when they lose. Running up that margin as much as possible and turning people out has to be our priority.
All right. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for joining us today. We really